On today's show, a question. What's happening in Minnesota's farm country? Disappearing grasslands, more drainage, and declining water quality. When drastic changes happen in Minnesota's farm country, what does it mean to water quality and wildlife? Are federal farm policies helping or hurting the environment? We'll ask the questions and look for answers next.
Minnesota Bound. Brought to you by Minnesota Select GMC Dealers.
Hi everybody, Raven and I welcome you to the show, and we are about to do a little something different on Minnesota Bound for the next 2 weeks as we take a look at some issues out in farm country. What is happening to the landscape out there? We read about more drainage, poorer water quality, and other issues, so let's take a look. Once upon a time, Minnesota was the land of sky-blue waters, with untainted lakes, clean rivers, and a vast sea of prairie grasses, dotted with duck-producing wetlands. Today, Minnesota has become the land of drained wetlands, disappearing grasslands, soiled rivers and lakes, tainted groundwater coming from Minnesota's farm country. Headlines in Minnesota's largest newspapers regularly sound the alarm. There's trouble brewing down on the farm.
There's a rapid change occurring on the landscape in the prairies.
Historically had 18 million acres of grass. Today we've got 220,000, give or take, acres of native prairie left. Less than, give or take 1% of the native prairie that was there once upon a time is left.
What we're seeing is the disappearance of wetlands. We're seeing an immense increase in drainage, primarily in the form of drain tiles.
In essence, a drained farm field speeds water off cropland and into ditches, creeks, and rivers. In addition, nature's natural water filters, grassland, is also disappearing at a rapid rate, according to DNR. Strips of grassland, called buffers, which are intended to slow the rush of water from fields, also are disappearing as landowners seek more ground to plant. The result has been Minnesota's water quality is declining, and wildlife species that rely on grassland for habitat also are facing hard times. For example, ringneck pheasants, the state's most popular game bird, has declined by more than 50% in the last decade.
Even if you don't hunt, even if you don't fish, people value wildlife. And you look at the populations of prairie grassland nesting birds, they're declining. They decline just like pheasants do when there's no grass.
Since 2008, roughly 1.3 million acres of grasslands in Minnesota have been converted to corn, soybeans, and wheat production. Looking ahead to the next 4 years, starting in 2013, nearly 626,000 acres of CRP, a conservation reserve program, may be plowed under in Minnesota when CRP contracts expire. Critics fear the nation's water quality is in trouble.
EPA just released a report where they looked at 2,000 U.S. streams and rivers and found that over half of them were in poor health, largely due to nitrogen and phosphorus, and that's largely from agricultural operations.
Minnesota is also losing water faster as farmers seek to improve crop yields with increased drainage of cropland. One example, in 1999, the Bois des Sioux Watershed District approved drainage permits for 2.9 miles of subsurface draining. In 2009, that figure had climbed to nearly 780 miles. And in 2011, drain requests reached more than 1,550 miles in one watershed.
Drainage does boost their yields. So there's a huge incentive for them to drain. The cost of drainage has gone way down with new technology. Now, in a lot of cases, farmers can do it themselves.
The most recent water quality report in Minnesota said more than 25% of the state's waterways are too contaminated with nitrates to be used for drinking water. And more than 70% of those nitrates were coming from farming operations, the report said.
We used to think of nitrates as a groundwater issue, and phosphorus was the surface water issue. Keep the soil on the land, the soil doesn't get in the water, you don't get the phosphorus in the water. And now we have data, and it's after 30 years of research, it's university tested, that says we've got a nitrate problem in surface water.
We've made essentially no real solid progress on water quality related to agriculture, and what's happening now is just reversing course.
Clearly, Minnesota's landscape has and is constantly changing. Indeed, the state's wetlands and grasslands continue to disappear, and the quality of our water, flowing in our rivers or drinking glasses, is also declining. These are the facts, but who or what's to blame for what's happening? More importantly, what to do about it? It's a controversial topic with no easy answers. That's next.
Minnesota Bound, brought to you by Minnesota's select GMC dealers. Ice Force, Connecticut, and by Seven Clans Casino.
Cargo planes have perfected the art of moving heavy freight. So has the all-new GMC Sierra. No competitor offers an advanced cargo system that includes an easy lift and lower tailgate, rear bumper step, LED lighting, and movable upper tie-downs. The all-new GMC Sierra. Incredible thinking in the form of a truck. Current GM owners trade up to this all-new specially equipped 2014 GMC Sierra for a total value of $5,250.
Let's continue looking at what's happening in farm country and how it may impact you. Minnesota's landscape is changing faster than most of us realize, and the consequences appear to be increasing as well. Fewer pastures, less grassland, more farmland under cultivation, more drainage, fewer wetlands, more flooding, and declining water quality.
I think you have to look at recognizing that tile drainage has an impact on water quality. So rather than just getting it off the land and putting it into the public waters, that we have some type of treatment so that there is a cost.
We're intensifying drainage across the Midwest. We're farming every square foot in response to these unusually high crop prices.
So does that mean the more we plant, the more we drain, the more problems we'll have?
It's not an easy question to answer. What the scientists tell me is that the drainage is going to increase the flow in the rivers on average. The way I look at it is that the drainage is increasing the risk of flooding. It's not necessarily causing the flooding, but it's contributing to this, this overall increased stream flow.
It's too easy to both defend and criticize if we just call it drainage. And our effort is to figure out how do different drainage components, different drainage systems function across the state. It's different in different places. And we have to also recognize that a tremendous amount of the agricultural tiling and drainage we see right now is simply replacing systems that are antiquated.
Between 2006 and 2011, farmers in Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and the Dakotas converted 1.3 million acres of grassland to grow corn and soybeans, according to a study by South Dakota State University. Last year in Minnesota, farmers planted 8.7 million acres to corn, a record. But when one crop goes up, another goes down.
Wildlife habitat, pheasants, ducks, deer are a product of the land just like corn and soybeans and sugar beets. To provide for pheasants, ducks, or deer, they need some space on the landscape.
Once a sea of grasses, both North and South Dakota have lost nearly 50% of their grassy landscape, putting America's largest duck factory at risk. In 2013, ringneck pheasant counts in Iowa, Minnesota, South and North Dakota all dropped drastically, by as much as 70%.
I think part of what's going on out there is kind of a gold rush mentality to farm every square foot. Conservation way in the back seat or in the bed of the pickup truck in order to cash in on this gold rush.
But who can blame a farmer for seeking increased profits? Almost nobody. Yet who wants a landscape of only corn and soybeans, muddy rivers, and tainted drinking water?
I don't look just at $7 corn. I look at, as a farmer, how much profit potential do I have on that acre? And not only are commodity prices higher than they were 10 and 15 years ago, my expenses are higher too.
Farmers that I'm aware of and polls that I've seen and surveys that I've seen indicate that farmers are by and far the best stewards of our land and are very deeply concerned about the condition of land and water, which is why they have embraced conservation to the extent that they have. We have a record number of acres enrolled in conservation programs today.
We all know we need the products of the land, but we maintain that there is a place for conservation on every farm. There is room for grass, there's room for wetlands.
Is there a place for soil conservation and wildlife on today's farms? If not, why not? Up next, more on a hot-button issue, water quality and why we should all be aware of what's happening in farm country.
Closed captioning is brought to you by the Yard, premier manufacturers of maintenance-free outdoor patio furniture and accessories from recycled plastic.
By the Yard maintenance-free furniture. Comfort, elegance, and recycling combined. Call today for your free catalog or go online to bytheyard.net.
Welcome back. As you can see, the issues in farm country and what's happening to Minnesota's landscape is a question with no easy answers. In just 5 years, Minnesota's farming landscape has seen drastic change. Less grassland, record corn planting, more draining of farmlands, fewer wetlands, and more nitrates in our groundwater. Did anybody mention declining wildlife? Why these changes in farm country? The answer depends on who you ask. Minnesota Congressman Collin Peterson says federal Farm Bill legislation, or lack thereof, has been weak regarding conservation programs.
I had the sod saver in the bill, and it got to conference. And at that time, the senators, not Senator Klobuchar, but the senators from North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana objected to it. So we had all this grassland that was plowed up, especially in South Dakota, because we're paying people crop insurance on the highest value, the highest production they have in that county. They can plow up new land and get that high yield, and this land should not be farmed. But the economics, Ron, are what's driving this more than anything else.
Craig Cox, an official with the Iowa-based Environmental Working Group, says farm bills passed by Congress in recent years have actually encouraged poor farming practices.
High prices are driving the train, but crop insurance and other federal policy is greasing the wheels and making it way easier for the bad things we're seeing. In one example of sort of backwards public policy, there's a tax credit that is highly profitable for farmers that allows them to rapidly depreciate the cost of drainage, so in a lot of ways taxpayers are paying farmers to drain.
As the criticism grows, some farm groups are reaching out to farmers, encouraging landowners to improve their conservation efforts.
And one of our messages to farmers in particular is, if you have a system that is in need of repair or replacement, We've got technology today. We can put in controlled drainage. We can do systems that my grandfather couldn't do. And so in doing so, if we can replace those old systems, we can actually have a better productivity outcome, better food supply, those types of things, and we can reduce potential environmental impacts, especially water quality.
Growing urban areas, not just farmers, Foremost says, have also had an impact on Minnesota's landscape, not all positive.
And I think it's a little bit disingenuous to look at a couple 100,000 acres of CRP that's being converted to cropland and ignore that between 1990 and 2005, we converted over 500,000 acres of good productive farm ground in the metro area into metro area.
There's only so much we can do, you know, at the federal level. And in South Dakota, the problem over there is they have no state wetland law, you know, and so it's like the Wild West.
Coming up, we'll continue our look at Minnesota's changing landscape and why it's happening now.
Minnesota Bound, brought to you by Radco Truck Accessories, Minnesota Agricultural Water Resource Center, and by Visit Grand Rapids.
In Minnesota, you're never too old to play in the snow. And when you play in our winter wonderland of Grand Rapids, you can almost hear nature say, "Welcome. Hope you stay a while." Because you'll need some time to explore new trails, get in a workout, catch your limit, or just go for a stroll in the woods. Leave the world behind, bundle up, and come play in the snow. Here in Grand Rapids, it's in Minnesota's nature.
Let's continue now, taking a look at how Minnesota is changing and changing fast. It's been said if the federal government was cutting down giant redwoods in California or draining fishing lakes in Minnesota, people would be up in arms. But as grasslands in the upper Midwest have disappeared at record rates in recent years, thanks in part to federal farm policy passed by Congress, well, nobody says much.
Well, it's very clear that we have to make sure that conservation is a major part of our farm bill and our farm policy. One of the things that we've been fighting for is to make sure that the CRP, the CSP, the programs that preserve land and also preserve farm practices that are better for the environment stay in place, so we have those incentives.
But at this moment, Congress is failing again to pass a new farm bill with stronger conservation programs.
I think what we ought to do is look at the farmers who are making a good living, but protecting soil and water and wildlife at the same time, and ask them what's working for you. Why are you doing this? How are you making this work when all around you, you see the opposite?
Our message to farmers is that a well-designed, well-engineered system can be really good for both productivity and the environment.
While we all want clean water, pretty prairies, and a few pheasants in the air, farmers and their critics don't seem to agree on much, including the decline in grasslands or the impact of farm draining practices. U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack.
I wouldn't say it's a result of federal farm programs. I think it's a result of market opportunities, which obviously increased the price that corn farmers and growers are receiving. What I would acknowledge is that we're obviously more aware of the condition of our water, which is a good thing, but I don't think it's fair to suggest that this has occurred just recently.
The Star Tribune reports that Minnesota has lost 312 square miles of wetlands and natural vegetation in a 5-year period, but some farm groups dispute those figures.
In Minnesota, we're really not seeing very many of those areas that were still native prairie or that had never been farmed converted to grassland, that are converted to cropland. That is not, in my estimation, happening in a real big way.
Draining critics contend spring floods are made worse by rushing water from the land. But Congressman Peterson doesn't see it that way.
I really disagree with this 50-year-old ideology that all tiling is bad. When they did this in southern Minnesota, they put a tile in the bottom of a wetland. That's what they did. And it drained the wetlands. We're not doing that. We're putting in pattern tiling. You've got to stay away from the wetlands. It's a better way to do this.
Yet others disagree with the congressman.
In the long run, there is a bigger concern, and that is what happens to all this water? Where does the water go? What does the water do?
What gives me hope is the farmers that I see doing a great job, which tells me we can have both, right? We can produce crops, but we can save the soil, we can have clean water, and we can have wildlife.
I believe those farmers want to have both things. They want to have a successful farming operation, but they can also have good conservation, smart conservation. But it's got to come through legislation, and we need to, work with those landowners to say, let's farm the best, let's buffer the rest.
Well, as you can see, there are many different opinions about what's happening in Minnesota's farm country. Next week, we'll continue taking a look at this issue involving the Red River and the Minnesota River. And are there farmers out there who have the right answers to what we need to do? That about does it for us. Remember, introduce a kid to the great outdoors. I'm Ron Sharon. Of course, the star of the show, who's looking for a treat, is Raven.
Transportation provided by Premier Transportation. Call 1-800-899-7433. For more information on these stories and more, catch us on the web at mnbound.com.